Hello everyone, my name is Aryan Bhandari and this is Java course by DoCoNation. In this session, we'll be learning about exception handling in Java. What is exception? So the formal definition of exception is that it is an event that occurs during the execution of a program that disrupts the normal flow of instructions and the application terminates abnormally. And that is why they are supposed to be handled by the programmers. We have also come across a word known as error. So what is the difference between error and exception? Errors are non-recoverable because they are caused by the machine your application is working on. Suppose it runs out of memory or there is something wrong with the machine itself, which cannot be handled by a programmer, right? So that is why errors are impossible to recover and errors occur at runtime. Now, exceptions are recoverable. Why? Because exceptions are some mistakes which are there in program instructions and which are there in the code which programmer has coded, right? So, which needs to be handled by the programmer. And exception can occur at runtime as well as compile time. Now, enough of theory, let's code it. How will we get exception? Let's just say I'm gonna print and I'm gonna divide a number by 0. Okay, so if you run this, it's gonna give me a exception, which is arithmetic exception, right? And if I create a array, let's just say it's like this, and I'm trying to access an index which is not there, right? So fifth index is not there, and if I run it, it's gonna give me an exception which is array index out of bounds exception, right? So this is how we are getting exceptions, but how to handle these exceptions? So for that, here is the basic syntax of that. So we have to wrap our code in a try and catch block. So this is known as try block. Try is a keyword, and then we're gonna write a catch block. Okay. So if I write this code inside my try, okay, I'm gonna comment this, and I'm gonna write a catch block like this, and I'm gonna catch this exception. So this is array index out of bound exception. So this is array index out of bounds exception, and this is the object E which is gonna have the exception, and then I can print my message over here, something like this. If I run it, it's gonna print like this, right? Now I can also use this object and call some methods like get message. Okay, now if I print it, so index out of bounds for length 3. So this is the message it gets, right? Okay, so this is the basic syntax of exception handling. Now there is one more block which is known as finally. So if I write some message inside this block, if I run this, it is gonna print finally ran. Okay, so whatever code is inside this finally block, it is gonna run even if your exception is not handled. So if I remove my catch block also, and if I run it, it's gonna still run the finally block. Okay, if I write a return statement also over here, it's gonna still print the code inside the finally block. So let's discuss about throwing default exceptions. So let's just say I'm gonna throw a new arithmetic exception. Okay, and I'm gonna find. Okay, now if I run this, so I've written throw new arithmetic exception and I've passed it a string. Okay, so it's giving me the, so it's not giving me properly. Why? Because I'm trying to catch array index out of bounds exception. So instead of that, I need to catch arithmetic exception. So I'm gonna paste it over here and I'm gonna run it again. Yeah, so it called the exception, and it is printing what message? It's printing this message. Okay, so we have passed it a string. Okay, so this string is set in the get message method, and whenever we call this method, it's gonna print. So if I remove this string and run it, so there is no message, right? And if I try to do the same thing, divide a number by 0, and let's just see, it's printing divide by 0, right? Because there's some message which is by default there in this method. So this was about throwing default exceptions. Okay, so you can also throw array index out of bounds exception. Okay, so there are many more exceptions. You can check it out in the Oracle documentation. Now let's look at how to throw our custom exceptions. So I'm going to use same code. I'm going to write my exception. Okay, so this will be my exception, and I'm going to create a class known as my exception, and I'm going to extend exception class. So I'm making my own custom exception. I have named it as my exception, and I'm going to override that get message which I was using, right? So I'm going to just write this annotation first, and I'm going to write this public string get message and return second, right, my custom message over here. This is my exception custom message. Now it is giving me an error. So it's telling me to add throws declaration. Okay. So whenever you're creating your custom exception and you're throwing by yourself, so then you have to add throws declaration. So if I click it after my main method, it's gonna write throws my exception. Okay, so this can be done with any other method. So if you are throwing any other new exception which has been created by you, you have to uh, write this declaration known as throws and your exception name. Okay, so now the error has gone. If I run it, so it's not gonna print anything. Why? Because I'm trying to catch arithmetic exception. So I need to catch my exception. Okay, and if I run it, so it's gonna print this is my exception custom message. Okay, so this is how you create your own custom exception. So this was basics of exception handling. Now here are some tips and rules. So these try and catch blocks can be nested. Okay, so in this try block I can write this try and catch block. Okay, and I'm gonna just remove this. Yeah, so in one try block I can nest many other try catch blocks. Okay, and there can be multiple catch blocks. Okay, so one catch block, so let me remove this, and so like this we can have one more catch block, and I can write some other like arithmetic exception, and like this. Okay, so this is also true. Now try block cannot work alone. So if I remove all these catch and finally blocks, it's gonna give me an error. Okay, so you need a catch or a finally block with try. Okay, try can work with catch or finally. Okay, catch and finally cannot run without a try block. Okay, so let me redo it and let me remove this try block. So now this will have errors. Okay, so we need try block. Whenever, so now in some cases I know that there can be arithmetic exception or there will be array out of bounds exception, but when you're developing an application, there you don't know what exceptions you might get, right? So what we do is that at the end we write a catch block which has this exception E. Okay, now this exception will have all the exceptions. Okay, and any exceptions which occurs which is not there in my exception, which is not there in arithmetic exception also, it's gonna catch it over. And this block must always be at the end, so this cannot be over here. Okay, so it's gonna give error. So this block will be always at the end, and finally block is always gonna run, as I said. Now that our Java bootcamp has completed, so I'll be sharing you the whole zip file of whatever the codes I have written, and now I'll be showing you how to import that zip file. Okay, so to import that file in your project explorer, right click, and then you have to go to import. Okay, go to existing projects into workspace, and then you have to select this. Okay, select archive files, and then you can browse, and you can select the archived one, archived zip file, and you can select the zip file, select all, and then you can finish. I cannot do this because I already have that folder in my workspace, so it's giving me a warning. Some projects cannot be imported because they already exist in the workspace, right? But you can import this like this. Okay, so this is it for the session. Thank you.